Yes or no will do on these first few, okay? Do you really believe that something came from nothing?
Yes.
Ready? Do you
to write the book, because in fact it made us realize that essentially you can get a universe from nothing without any supernatural shenanigans, that basically by quantum mechanics and the laws of physics we understand in principle, an entire universe with 100 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars, can come from nothing because its total energy could be zero, and therefore you don't need to literally violate any laws of physics to create a universe. And no.
I mean, there was the question that came from the audience where somebody said, I'm holding nothing in my fist, and you can't make something out of nothing. I mean, which of course was a reference to Lawrence's book, Something from Nothing. The whole point about modern physics is that you can't do it by common sense. And that's why you need physicists. If you could do it by common sense,
that's really
yeah, if you could do it by common sense, you wouldn't need Lawrence. So
I'll take that as a compliment, Richard.
Yeah. So it is very clear from reading reviews of your book, Something from Nothing. Well, first of all, I should say that I was very proud to have written the afterword to this book. I was accused last night by Cardinal Pell of not having read the book because he said, you wrote the foreword and you evidently didn't get to the end. If he'd read the book, he'd have known that I did not write the foreword.
In fact, that's the thing that I objected the most. I don't mind ignorance so much. It's the illusion of knowledge that upsets me more. And in fact, he has to be held responsible, and I'm happy we're going to Sydney because I plan to hold him responsible for criticizing a book that he clearly hadn't read. And that was a clear example of it. He quoted verbatim from a review by a philosopher of my book, and of course totally bungled it, totally distorted. But the first part he said 6 pages before the end of the book, which was how this review in the New York Times began. Yeah. But the key idea, which really is so difficult and I guess challenging and perhaps threatening to both some philosophers as well as theologians, is this question of something from nothing. As it happens in the case, as I think we've talked about before, in biology. I mean, how do you get life from non-life? That was originally sort of the main theological question. How do you get life from non-life? And even in the original version of Darwin's book, he says at the very end, God breathed life into the first species because...
Only in the first edition.
Only in the first edition.
In second edition, he leaves out God. Oh, no, the other way around. Sorry.
Yeah, he put it back in because that's right.
In the first edition, there's no mention of God. He says, originally breathed. And then in the second edition and subsequent editions, he says, by the Creator. But that's a much easier problem in a way, because you're starting with chemistry. You start from molecules bumbling around in the warm little pond, as Darwin called it, primeval soup, as people later called it. And then you get the first self-replicating molecule. But something from nothing, from literally nothing, and that's what really gets people. That's the one that's really counter to common sense. And they clearly misunderstand what you mean by nothing. So
well, exactly. And the problem is I'm often accused of not talking about the nothing that classical philosophers 2,000 years ago or theologians talked about. And the answer is I'm not really interested in their nothing. I'm interested in the real nothing. I'm interested in asking the question, based on our understanding of the universe, we'll probably get back to this often, science changes what we mean by words. And it changes that meaning because we learn about the universe. We actually make progress in science, unlike theology. And that's because we can be wrong, and we can learn, and we learn from the universe. So if we ask the question, and I think perhaps the most offensive thing I said it was initially at the beginning, is that something and nothing are not theological or philosophical quantities, they're physical quantities. Most people recognize that something is a physical quantity, but they refuse to accept the idea that nothing might be a physical quantity, somehow the absence of something. And so what is remarkable and surprising in some sense how there's been a reaction to it is, in this particular book, what I tried to do was not attack theological notions, but celebrate our changing picture of reality. The amazing discoveries that have been made over the last 50 years, some by people here, by my friend Brian Schmidt here, who won the Nobel Prize for his discovery, that have changed completely our picture of the universe and made it plausible, the most remarkable and unexpected thing you can imagine, that you could start with absolutely nothing. That means, unlike the cardinal said, and unlike some people argue, no particles, but not even empty space. No space whatsoever. And maybe even no laws governing that space. And we can plausibly understand how you could arrive without any miracles, without any need for a creator, without any supernatural creation, you could produce everything we see. And I find that the fact that it's plausible, remarkable, in the same sense that I think I found it plausible when I first learned about evolution. The amazing fact that the diversity of life on Earth, which seems so designed and complex, could arise from so simple a beginning.
These two things are both extraordinarily exciting, intriguing, enthralling. Clearly life is, clearly the idea that you can start with nothing but chemistry, the ordinary laws of chemistry, and end up with us and kangaroos and oak trees and wombats. I mean, that is the most astonishing fact. But you know, even more astonishing is that you can get physics, you can get matter, you can get everything from nothing.
They are, because it seems like you should violate some law that, and out of, you know, as classical philosophers said, out of nothing comes nothing. But that's, the interesting thing is that's based on common sense.
One or two?
I'm going to narrow it down to 7 premises. It'll prove the point. They're very quick. They're like brainless. I mean, they're so simple. I believe you'll agree with every one of them.
Sure. Okay, go ahead.
Okay?
I bet you're wrong.
We'll start with premise number 1. And premise number 1 is simply that something cannot come from nothing. I trust you accept that.
No, I don't.
Okay.
The known universe is about 93 billion light years in diameter and is filled with 10 to the 54th kilograms of stuff. And yet physicists say the whole thing came out of nothingness during a single Big Bang nearly 14 billion years ago. How this happened is perhaps the most fundamental question that science can tackle. How exactly do you get something from nothing? It all starts with entropy, which is just a fancy way to talk about disorder. Nothing is as disordered as, well, nothing. You can mix it up, scramble it, rearrange it all you want, and you still have nothing.
Or how it is that something that's in some genuinely philosophically interesting sense, nothing produces something. None of the models we're talking about, it seems to me, are purporting to bear on this question. I mean, there are people who talk about these things irresponsibly as if they do bear on this question, but I don't think
The talk you're about to watch is entitled From Nothing to Something. In this talk, I will tell you about how the universe went from being empty and boring to a place in which gravity is dragging together the future stars and galaxies. Please enjoy the talk.
From the primordial cloud of gas and cosmic dust, gravity forged the stars.
So I'd say something coming from nothing is not logically impossible, but then is it just best to say it's physically impossible? End quote. And to which I would respond as follows. It might be physically impossible for something to come from nothing. We don't know. But it's rather hard to imagine why or how it could be physically impossible. If a condition of absolute nothingness had been the case at some point, if there were nothing in existence at all, literally nothing, the complete absence of everything, there'd be nothing, literally nothing, to physically prevent something from springing into existence out of nothingness. There'd be nothing to cause it either, but nothing to prevent it. No reason why it could not happen. That is, there would be no causes, no forces, no principles, no laws of nature that would be violated, because there'd be no anything at all. One of the reasons for thinking that it's possible, logically possible, a bare possibility, perfectly conceivable, that something could come from nothing, is precisely that there'd be nothing, literally nothing, to prevent that. There's no contradiction involved, and no physical principle would be violated if that did happen, because there'd be no such principle to violate. What reason is there to think that something can't come from nothing?